between my channel and my clients' channels, I've made a ton of YouTube thumbnails for videos that have many, many millions of views. And it's got to the point where I have it pretty much down to a science. And I feel pretty confident in my ability to hit a high quality bar consistently. And so I figured I'd share that with all of you and show you exactly how I go about it. And to do that, there's pretty much two things I want to talk about. The first is this Photoshop file that shows me everything in context so that when I make my graphic, I know exactly how it's going to look in different YouTube screens at different sizes, be it mobile or desktop, and different resolutions, and show me exactly how it's going to look. And so that there is zero guesswork on my part. So I know exactly what I'm doing. And the second thing is a little more ambiguous. It's kind of just a set of graphic design rules that helps me know when to push things further and know that it's not quite hitting the bar yet. And you got to just keep trying different things and try harder, make something look more visually interesting. So with those two in mind, let me show you the first thing. So here in Photoshop, it looks like a normal mockup, right? Like I got my little thumbnails here. You can imagine putting your own little graphic here. Same thing with the profile icon. But if I were to zoom out, you can see it is actually a ginormous mockup of, I don't know, what is this, 16 screens? Again, showing you all the different major instances that your graphics are going to show up in YouTube, because there's an infinite number of devices that you could mock it up, but I wanted to show all the major instances that, look, you got to account for these things. So here on the bottom row, I have all of the mobile stuff. These are, I think this is the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and then here's just the iPhone 16 Pro, and then here's a 4K desktop, and then here's a 1080 desktop. And so you can see, like I was talking about, when you're designing your graphic, you can see, okay, there's 20 some odd other thumbnails here. Is mine strong enough? Does mine compete with all of the other ones? Would I click on my thumbnail? And so if the answer is no, then you keep designing, try something new, make it more interesting, until eventually you're at the point where, yes, you can see that now I'm finally competing with these other ones. Or like that's just like in terms of, selection. But when it comes to like the literal UI of YouTube, like UI puts stuff over the thumbnail every now and again. So like the timer here is always a slightly different size, but it's always in the bottom right corner, so you can account for that. Okay, don't put anything on the bottom right because it'll pretty much always get covered. Same thing with on this screen. It puts the video name. I think this is like when your video's over, so like, or when it's about to end. So this is like your final suggested thing, and so probably not best to put any vital information here on the top. Try to keep it elsewhere. But throughout the whole thing, I wanted to make it pixel perfect, so it's exactly how YouTube does it. So there's, again, no guesswork. So for instance, for the Pro Max, I don't know why YouTube does this, but for whatever reason, the profile icon is a rounded square here on the right, but then on the Pro, it's a circle on the left. I'm not sure why, but I wanted to show you exactly how it's going to look so you can account for that. Same thing with, like, it says suggested video on one, but up next in another. I don't know. But yeah, so like, again, you would just make the one change and it would populate everywhere. And so that also is true. You probably noticed there's a couple other pink things, the profile icon, but also this banner image. So I'll walk through that here in a second, but let's start by clicking on the thumbnail. So if I open my folder here, it's all color coded too. So I wanted it to be easy to use by anyone. You do not have to be a graphic designer to open this thing, because I recognize that most people are not graphic designers. Like, this is what I do every single day. But the people that don't use Photoshop like this, it's kind of frustrating. So I wanted to color code everything. Everything's organized and layered and named and whatever, so that you can easily make these changes and do the work yourself if you wanted to. So I have in this folder, I have these three items. If I were to double click on the thumbnail of one of them, this is called a smart object. So I'm going to double click it, and you'll notice here on the top, a new item opened up. And with this being a smart object, this is essentially like a sublayer. Sorry if I'm like over explaining again, like just in case someone doesn't know. But so if I were to, I can go back and forth. And so like when I make changes in this one layer, it'll update everywhere. So let me go ahead and do that. I have an image that I want to drag in. So I got this kid playing with a VR headset. I'll just kind of scale it up like, okay, this is my perfect thumbnail. I'll place it. Let me just go ahead and put it in that folder. And so then I'll save this. I'll hit Control S on the keyboard. That'll save it. And then if I go back into my main thing, you see, poof, there it is, updated every single spot. So yeah, easy enough. I feel like I'm over explaining it at this point, but the thumbnail, when it comes to like the actual YouTube UI, isn't, you know, thrown through the ringer too much, because like there's not a ton of stuff that goes over it. Like I mentioned, the top and the right you want to avoid, but generally it's whatever. The real thing where it matters is the profile banner. So this thing gets cut up a bunch of different ways. So if I, just like we did before, I'll double click on the banner and this opens another thing called banner. And so I have a new, so you might have noticed before in the thumbnail, I had how to export. So this just gives you the exact instructions of how I do it. Because I work at double the resolution on all these. That's just a general preference. I like to work higher and I can just cut it down. So if I go to image size, you'll see it's 2560, but I recommended 1280. So you would just, when you go to export, so you follow those steps, you just say 50% and then 1280. Same deal with the banner here. It's 2560, but I have it set to 5112. So anyway, what I wanted to tell you about was the guides, because in the thumbnail section, I did not have a guide section because there's not really too much to guide. But here, this stuff gets cut up quite a bit. So this darker square or rectangle is only visible on mobile. And then on desktop, it extends a little bit out. So if I were to actually save this, Control S, and then go to my main thing, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So these top two are desktop. And so you can see how the thing is like stretched all the way to the top, but you can actually kind of see this blue square up top. You'll notice, or blue rectangle, that's like the border of the image, showing that while yes, it's visible wide, there's still stuff on the bottom cut out. So if I were designing this graphic, anything that gets put here is cut out. Same thing on mobile. You can see it scales it up a little bit so that you don't even get this side area on mobile. So if you were to design something on this area, I would, on this graphic, I would probably keep it within this dark area. So like what I've done in the past, like let's say I'm putting kind of, let me make a new layer, my brush. Okay, there we go. So like if I were to put some, I don't know, like a studio logo and then some legal line and then the logo of my product right here, I'll hide the guide. I would keep it all. And actually if I hit Control, I think it's colon on the keyboard, the guides come up. And so you can see I kind of guided the thing too. So you can see exactly how it gets cropped. But I'll get rid of that for a second. But so yes, if I look at the image right now, it looks kind of stupid, but if I were to save it, that's like my safe area. And so, you know, it looks great on mobile, looks okay on desktop. But then the reason for this is I'm pretty sure, I saw it like one time, I forget where it was, but I think it was on like YouTube, like on an actual TV when you're going through a profile is where the whole thing is visible for whatever reason. So it's some obscure instance where you can see the whole image. So don't like put a white block or whatever, like still design something there, but you know, just keep that in mind. So anyway, let me get rid of the guides, get rid of my image I just made. And again, I'll drop in, I have an image, drop this thing in and I'll scale it up and then Control S, save it, and it'll populate. And so, you know, I would probably keep tweaking this, and actually maybe that doesn't look too bad. So maybe something a little more textural works here in the banner image, rather than something that like could get cut kind of nasty. You don't want anything too like, oh, if it were to get cropped, it would be the end of the world. You know, kind of avoid that. Anyway, and then same difference. If I wanted to, actually, I'll close this. One thing I could also call out is I have it organized so you don't even need to touch this work section. Like this is how I put everything together, but you don't need to go through there. You can literally just stay in this main area. But let me go to, just like we did before, I'll click on profile icon. I have another test image. And so like, let me just scale this up and I'll drag that in, I'll save this, and see, voila. So just like that, I mean, we see exactly how the thumbnail looks at different sizes, how the profile icon looks at different sizes, and how the banner looks at these different screens. So one thing I could also show you is when it comes to these images that I use a lot of like royalty-free images, so you could just do the same thing. The websites I like are called, what is it? This one's Pexels, and then this one's Unsplash. And so you could just, go through, search for whatever it is you're looking for, and there's probably something that's, a high resolution image of whatever you need. It's a good thing to get you started, but we'll talk about like actually picking pictures later. So anyway, that is one thing. And then another, when it comes to the fonts, I have it designed so that everything, like I mentioned, is pixel perfect. But I did want to point out that the mobile and the desktop versions use different font families, just because that's how YouTube designed it. So here on desktop, on the top, it is using, this is called Roboto, and on iOS, it's using San Francisco. They're similar, but like I mentioned, I wanted exactly how YouTube does it so that that's represented here. So just so you're aware, you have to design, or you'll have to install a lot of fonts. I provided all the fonts, but sometimes Photoshop can still be a little weird. Like you'll have it installed on your computer, but it'll not link up properly. And it's not like InDesign where you can just say, hey, look, turn all these fonts into those fonts. It just doesn't work that way. So even if you have them, there could be a case where you have to do it manually. But yeah, so that is the first section. But then you're probably thinking, how do I actually get started on designing the thumbnail? Like, you have all the technical stuff down now where you can see how it plugs into everything, but how do you look past the blank canvas and know where to put stuff? Like, how do I get in the graphic designer mindset? And I think the best way I can explain that is by looking at my old thumbnail format and seeing why it sucks. So I used this format for a couple videos when I was first starting, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I think the general idea was right, but there's a lot of things I think I need to change about this. So for instance, the text, the whole idea was I wanted to call out whatever the topic was clearly. I mean, just put the name of the video in the thumbnail. Seems easy enough. Well, I should have leaned more into the quote unquote clickbaity kind of mindset where it's a little more poppy, attractive, using fewer words and not trying to explain the entire title in the thumbnail, because that doesn't matter. You don't need to reiterate exactly what's said right next to the thumbnail and when it says actually the name of the video, but give like the 5-word max punchy headline of your video. So in my case, Substance Painter to 3D Stager workflow, I can cut out probably most of these words. I would probably just take Painter and Stager. So I would just copy that. Like I'm doing a rough paint over here because these are the names of the two softwares. Oop. And so I'll just copy that. And then it would be something large like this, where I'm really filling up the space so that there's no confusion, and it doesn't have to line up, be a complete solid block. Like, it's nice when typography is a little jagged on the edges at times, so you can play with that a bit. But so I would probably do something simple like that, or rather, other way around, Painter to Stager. And so really catching your attention, cut out all the fluffy text and really catch your attention here and get you like on get the viewer on the same page of what exactly this is as quickly as possible. And then also what that's doing is getting rid of a lot of this negative space. So I could probably even make it larger. So something like that. But the difficulty here is the font that I chose doesn't fill the space very well. I think this is Gotham. Gotham, Helvetica, those are like classic, easy fonts. But the problem is that it's not very tall. It's a very kind of like even, perfect letter kind of font. So you want something probably that's as tall as you can get and really fill that space, because this is a thumbnail. This is a super duper small thing. It's supposed to be the size of your thumbnail, and it still be readable. So what I would probably do is adjust the font a little bit. So I have a couple examples of fonts that I like that kind of fill that void. So something taller than wide, in no particular order. These are just different ones that I think would fit that bill. So like Press Gothic is what I use on The Last of Us graphics when I'm working with them. But yeah, and then like any one of these would really elongate and fill that space more effectively, because you want to get rid of as much empty space as you can, because otherwise you're just wasting real estate. Like if I go back to the old version, there is so much space where if I'm looking at a small size, one, I can't read the text, and two, I just don't really know what I'm looking at. And so like actually that brings us into the imagery section in this case. So the topic of this video is like 3D software. And so that's why I had this little 3D shovel thing that I had modeled and set up, but it's not very interesting. It's a very tall subject and doesn't fill the space very well. Again, leaves a ton of empty negative space here. So what I should have done, really, a shovel is just a terrible item to do for this kind of thing, because you want something solid and compact. So I wanted to split this into two of like, this is like the information side, and then this is where I keep whatever kind of cool item. It could be, you know, some 3D model or a picture of a person. Like when I worked on Madden, the EA game, I would put players on the loot boxes essentially. And that would just be more visually attractive, like the, you know, the classic, like on a clickbait article, like 69 things that happened on so-and-so, and, you know, just like someone's like face making a weird expression. That is too much, but it's the right idea where it is a person to make you like connect to that image a little quicker. And so you just naturally feel like, okay, maybe this is something a little friendly or something that you want to click on and interact with. So maybe I do a picture of a person, but either way, whatever it is, a shovel sucks because it's so long. You want something a little more compact. So I would start by doing that. So, I mean, in the case of the shovel, honestly, I could probably just get rid of most of this. I'll just make a super duper rough selection. I'll copy this and just scale it up. And like if I were to like look at the head of the shovel, and like I would way adjust the like the lighting and the texturing and everything so that it is just prettier and more attractive. But then also on top of that, like you can see, I got kind of lost in the details. I put so much noise. I was thinking like, oh, this is like a grainy footage, but that kind of thing really doesn't matter because it's a thumbnail. No one is going to see this. So do not spend your time getting lost in all these finer details of like, oh my God, I want it to look exactly this way and got to paint out every pixel. That's not really the point here because no one will see it. You're just wasting your time, really. And then looking back, I'm not as crazy about the logos here on the bottom because they kind of detract from the color scheme that I had going on. So this thing is meant to be a system so that every thumbnail, I can just change the text, change the image behind it, and then it is the same from one to the other. So you see, like as a viewer, you see the thread that connects them all. They all look similar, you know? But the little icons here for representing the software, I think kind of detract from that because in this case they're green and then everything else is this like orangish color. I could have picked any other image, but like what I'm saying is like now you're adding more colors in. And I think also this top section on the note of colors, like this blue sky, draws your attention up when it's not the center of attention. So like you want to use the colors to guide to whatever you're looking at. And in this case, the two things are the title and the image. Those above all else should be what you look at. So I think in a number of ways, this is kind of failing because it's not drawing your attention correctly. There's things detracting, color schemes are different, and it's just overall kind of jumbled. And so then on top of that, this text here, so like on the note of wanting to have a bit of hierarchy and really like have big, medium, small kind of attention grabbers, I would keep this probably in a pretty similar scale so that painter to stager is huge, and then full tutorial and my name are kind of these secondary things. So it's almost like a fall off, like you have the big thing and then everything else is kind of cascading off the edges and kind of bleeding away. All though like secondary or tertiary to the main title that you want here. And then the image too. And then, so on that note, I would probably, like, you could just imagine if I were to cover these guys, because like I mentioned, I don't like the colors. So do one of those. Again, this is a super rough paint over, but then like, let's imagine this was instead text that said the name of the software. So to me, of course, this looks terrible. Like the point is not to be something I would post, but like the general sketchiness of it, I think is much closer now to being something attractive at small scale. So like if I were to zoom out and show before and after, like I cannot tell what I'm looking at in a number of different ways here, but now I'm getting much closer, you know, and I think this direction is much more solid. But now with that in mind, let me show you what that actually kind of translates to. So I have my big list of thumbnails. This is a little mood board I throw together and just kind of look at all my thumbnails together and kind of see how everything's working. But with this kind of graphic in mind, this little kind of system, you can see exactly how I ended up where I am now. So I essentially have two types of thumbnails here. So on the left hand is what I call quick tips, and then on the right is a full tutorial. So these videos, I want them to be like within a minute-ish, and this like get in, get out, this is how to use whatever tool in this software, you know. But then when I want to go a little bit more elaborate, I do these illustration-y things, photograph-heavy things. And so yeah, you can see this system that I kind of allude to, I refine much more in these. So on the quick tips, I get rid of the icons, so it says Photoshop instead, and rather than saying or than having the colors of the software there, I color code every single quick tip based on the software. So Photoshop is blue, After Effects is purple, green for this Substance Painter, and so on. And so that answers a lot of my questions already. Like when you're staring at this blank canvas, you think, oh, what colors do I use? What's the subject? How big is the text? What is this? And you're trying to answer every one of these questions. There's one already. I color code it by software and the text is big. And you're trying to fill every inch of that with something. Have a bit of hierarchy there too. And so like now you're going item by item on this list, answering all these questions so that there's a reason for everything. You know, there's no arbitrary. In the case of my tutorial here, I wasn't even talking about shovels. I don't know why I picked shovels. I just wanted some 3D item, and I probably should have done something else, something more relevant that would have like connected to the viewer more. Because in the case of the colors here, these are all colors based on, like, I don't arbitrarily pick After Effects being purple. Like that is After Effects, the branding of that software is purple. So the viewer already associates it, and there's just a bit of branding there and kind of like repetition, so you know exactly what you're getting into. And then on top of that, I talk about this main text being bigger and wanting to fill that space more. So that's exactly what I did here. I don't remember the name of this font, but I liked it a lot because it's tall, and which is exactly what I wanted. It fills that space really well, but it wasn't tall enough. And so I actually did edit it. So like in the case, if you can't find exactly what you want, you can make changes yourself. So like I did stretch those letters just a little bit, and you would have never noticed, you know, if I didn't tell you. But, cause usually people think, oh no, I don't want to stretch things. Cause that's like a golden rule. Like that's just something you don't do, in graphic design, but you know, no one's going to notice. Do whatever you have to do to make it look right. But anyway, so this font in particular had a little bit of quirkiness to it that I like, where like the G connects and then the R has this weird kind of divot in it. Little things like that. The L looks normal, so does the T. And so like it doesn't feel overly attention grabby, and it's not like, oh look, I'm weird and quirky, but there's just a little bit of uniqueness to it, and I really like that. So that's why I picked this font. And then again, like keeping that hierarchy, so this title is the super duper important thing, and then everything else cascades down from that. Is really what I want to do, and like build a sense of hierarchy with it. And then for the icon, I essentially have this filter that I run over it in Photoshop, so that I wanted every icon to look uniform, but I didn't want to illustrate everyone every time. So for instance, like some of these I download or trace or whatever from different places. And when I do that, so for instance, actually this picture is rounded here on the corner. This square is not rounded, but they still feel uniform. There's nothing about it. You go, oh, wait a minute, this feels like mismatched or something, because that filter is like the great equalizer with everything, makes everything feel uniform no matter what that icon was illustrated like, you know? And so that's why I went with this system. So I'm answering all these questions of like, how do I, again, pick colors, fill the space, and like give hierarchy from one thing to another. And in this case, actually on the note of hierarchy, the icon I wanted to be super large, but almost pushed back, the same color as the background, so that it doesn't feel like it's fighting with the text at all. Like they still feel like they belong together, you know? And then even on top of that, the way the icon kind of glows, has a little bit of shadow too on the rim, I have the same exact thing on the text, so they feel like they're uniform, like they belong together. And you know, this is not something I arrived at day one. This was many months of kind of just thinking about it in the background, because I was on no timeline. Like if I could have figured it out much quicker if I like sat down and spent the time on it, but just passively thinking about it, like, wait, how could I make that look better, is kind of how I've arrived at this. And then with all of that said, I think the other thing you have to keep in mind is that when you're designing these thumbnails, it's not a straight line of just spend the hours, do the work, and then you get to the final product and it's done. Because when it comes to this graphic design work, you largely don't know where you're going until you finally get there and you see like, this is it. Because you'll sink hours in the wrong direction all the time. And just because you sink those hours in a graphic does not mean it's a good one. And that because I spent all this time toiling away on all these little details, this is the answer. Because it happens all the time where I throw away stuff because it just was not working, and I wanted it to so bad, but it just isn't, and you have to be able to throw it away. And I can show you actually on the thumbnail for this video that I'm working on. I'm still making a little changes here and there, but the general idea I changed a bunch. And there were a lot of times where I was kind of complacent and thinking, oh, I could ship this older version that I had, but I knew something was gnawing at me and I just didn't like it for whatever reason. And so I threw it away and kept changing until I got where I want. So in this case, this is where I am right now. And if I go through these other versions, you can see other things I was trying. Like this version I thought was fine, and I could have 100% went with it, but I didn't like the angle of like how everything was so flat, like so tilted. And I didn't like how it was a little hard to tell what those thumbnail outlines are. I wanted something that clearly illustrated, like, here's a thumbnail and they're in a grid. Because right now it's almost like maybe I'm looking at film reels or something, and maybe there's a little ambiguity there. Whereas here, I wanted it solid. Like you have the one example of a thumbnail, and then there's all these tiles next to it to kind of imply like, okay, it just keeps going on and on. But then I tried other versions. It was a little more blue for a little while. For a while, was trying to make like a grid of thumbnails, and like it's cool and all, but it's just difficult to read. And ultimately, that's what it has to be. It has to be easy to read in both ways. Both the imagery and the text have to work together. If they're not, in my case, you can do this however you want. You can use wider fonts. Like if you find a way to get wide fonts to fill the space, go ahead and do that. But in my case, because the text, the way English is written, it goes left to right. I find that it's just, if you write wide, you lose space. So you want to get it tall. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. I kind of didn't want the imagery to compete with the text. And then as I got more in focus here, it's just too much. It's just hard to read and too much contrast. And so I was thinking, okay, well, what if they were black? Well, in that case, like now you kind of lose the text is easier to read, and I could add a little darkening behind it too to make it even better, but you lose the thumbnailness of it. Like it's kind of hard to see that this is a grid of thumbnails because they're all so dark and so blurry. And I spent so much time gathering the images for that grid and thinking, oh my God, this is gonna be perfect. This is such a good idea, but it just wasn't working. And so I had to throw it away. And I think this other one, this is an old version too. And then I look at this thumbnail and it's not the most, oh my God, this is the most incredible thumbnail in the world. Like, that's not the point of it. It's to illustrate whatever it is that I'm trying to say and grab your attention. I mean, if you're here, you clicked on it, you know, so it did something right. And also on top of that, because YouTube is like white, this kind of off black and red, I wanted to stick with that and kind of build that association of YouTube. So for instance, like how I have in my mood board, like I told you how I use all the colors based on the software, I wanted to do exactly that again to kind of build the association of YouTube. And again, I probably will change this a little bit. I have a couple more ideas I want to try. So like maybe at this point in the video, this is already outdated, who knows? But yeah, so like I just wanted to kind of keep it in line with what you already know. And then on top of that, one thing I could call out is when you're trying to think of how this imagery is laid out. So in my case, I have text on the left, imagery on the right. They kind of point towards each other. The text reads to the image, and then the way the image is laid out, it almost reflects off that. So if I show you like how my other examples look, you can see text on the left, but the imagery is always pointed to the left, as if like your eye goes one way and then it kind of goes back the other, because you don't want your eye to just shunk clean off the page and then that's it. Then you kind of just on to the next thing. You want to kind of like trap the viewer and have them just keep looking at it, go back from one item to the other and kind of like feed from one item, so that you don't just lose them right off the bat. So that's why I point every one of these images to the text and then text to the item. Same thing with this. Text goes to the image is angled in such a way that it goes back. Again, you look at it and this is not going into like an art gallery or something, but that's not the point. It's to catch your attention and make you feel like, okay, this guy at least knows enough to teach me something, you know? But yeah, if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate it. And if you have any questions or anything, or want to bounce design ideas off me or show me what you're working on and kind of get some advice or anything, get my thoughts, I'd be happy to help. So feel free to email me, and it might take me a minute because I do get quite a few emails about people needing help with various things just because I got so many videos now. But yeah, I will get back. Feel free to double ping me if I don't get back to you soon enough. But yeah, and when it comes to any one of these things that I've been talking about, you can mix and match as you want. You don't need to take my advice on any of these things, because when it comes to this type of work, like every situation is different. So take what you need, or don't need. You don't need the mock-up, my approach to typography, whatever it may be. But yeah, so I guess final notes. Arc'teryx, if you want to sponsor me, I do YouTube tutorials. They do okay. So let me know. Catch you guys later.